I always like to ask kind of what got you started writing, like if you can pinpoint and talk about the initial creative spark and maybe your early creative endeavors, and then kind of take us through your story and tell us kind of where you are now.
Okay. Well, I started writing in 5 subject notebooks over 40 years ago because I was disappointed one too many times and I thought I could do a better job. Well, that's a little arrogant because writing and writing well are two different things, which I didn't have any clue. And I did that for about 11 years. Then I got a word processor that evolved into a computer. And I wrote back in the day when you mailed your manuscript off to the publisher as a submission. And at that time, I had no clue that there were two different markets, that there was a CBA market and an ABA market, Christian booksellers and American booksellers. Well, I recommitted my life to God in 1989, and I asked that I would write something that would glorify God, not just another romance. And so when I started sending out the manuscript, I kept getting back rejections saying it doesn't fit our guidelines. Well, I was totally naive. What are guidelines? I had no clue, right? And so I'd read a book that's on how to work your rejections, how you call the publishing house, and the editor, and you ask them a certain questions or whatever. And I kept getting, well, I loved them, but it don't fit our guidelines. I loved it, but it don't fit our guidelines. I'm like, well, what are your guidelines? And then when I got the guidelines for Christian fiction, I was in shock because they are so very conservative. I'm like, I
Hmm.
don't know anybody who lives like this much, much less write like that. But I didn't know. I just had no clue that there was a Christian booksellers market and the guidelines were that conservative. So I tried and tried and tried to rewrite and revise my manuscripts, and I just didn't even recognize my own work. Finally, I just threw them all out and said, you know what? I cleaned it up. There was nothing, it still stayed within biblical principles. There may be a curse word or a fight, and usually there's a lesson. If there's a central scene or anything like, there's a lesson that follows. It's not just there for shock value or whatever. So I just wrote what I loved and what I would like to read. And then a publisher, The Tempered Hearts, was published in 2000, December of 2000, by Writers Exchange e-publishing. And even back then, ebooks were not really published. That's what I was told. It's not really
Hmm.
published. But as far as I'm concerned, if it's there for public consumption and you're making money off of it, it's published, right?
Yeah.
So she loved it. She did the first two, and I would get the printed copies done and take them around to Books A Million bookstores. Back then, you could do that. You can't do it anymore, and do book signings. And that's kind of how it got started. And then with Bayou Writers Group, I belonged to a couple different writers groups, one in Alexandria and one in Beaumont. It's like they met on the weekdays. Well, the one in Alexandria met on Saturdays, but the one in Beaumont and the one in Lafayette met on Tuesdays. And I'm like, I worked full time, had a family. It was just not feasible to drive that far for an hour meeting or 2 hour meeting and drive back at night, and just, didn't work. So, and then Alexandria, they started making changes to the group. And my husband kept saying, why don't you just start a group? And I'm like, you don't know how much work that is. Well, one day, a gentleman contacted me through email. He didn't know there was any published authors in Louisiana. He lived in Jennings. Can I come meet you? So my husband said, yeah. So he came over, and my husband said, well, I've been telling her for months she ought to start her own group. And the guy's Randy Dupree, he's the co-founder. He said, well, I'll help you. And that's how Bayou Writers Group got started. So it kind of just fell into place, as the time passed by.
Well, yeah, let me say, well, I appreciate Bayou Writers a lot. So thank you because when I started writing, it was a very insular activity. I was isolated. I did it kind of in the dark in the very early mornings. I didn't talk about it to anybody when I started kind of seriously writing. And so whenever I kind of moved along and I wanted to start connecting with the people that are writing, I look around and Bayou Writers Group was the option. And since then, I've gotten to know Raya and met several other people, and just having the support group and some other people I can go and because I have people on the internet. I have some communities on the internet that I interact with pretty regularly, but knowing people in my community that are doing anything like what I'm trying to do has been so so valuable to me. So
Right.
I can offer a sincere thank you to you and Randy for that opportunity. I want to go back and talk a little bit about the Christian fiction, um, and the way that you are trying to write something that's good and true, but it doesn't necessarily fit this kind of squeaky clean cookie cutter mold. I've run into that a little bit because I'm not. It's hard for me to call my stuff Christian fiction in one sense because it's not what people would expect out of Christian fiction. But I think where we align, I don't write romance, but we're both very interested in somehow communicating something that's really true and that finds its roots in our faith in God and faith in truth. But it doesn't align with your kind of stereotypical Christian fiction. So take me back and talk to me. I was interested. You talked about how did I understand correctly? You kind of tried to change your writing for a time to fit their mold, and it just didn't feel right.
Right. I did. I tried to revise and cut out. Well, one of the guidelines is that heroine cannot appear out of her bedroom in night clothes. Now, some of that may have changed over the years. And I'm going to be quick to say, and I'm sure you are too, that what I write is not better. It's only different. Anything that gives God glory deserves to be praised. But the very first in the third chapter of Tempered Hearts, he finds her asleep in the barn. She's a large animal veterinarian. She woke up having a nightmare, and all she could do was get out of the room. And she ended up in the barn because she had delivered a filly, and she was checking on the horses, and she ended up falling asleep in the barn. So, and she's in her nightgown. So I'm like, okay, that was not going to fly. And then they go to it's set in Bandera, Texas. They go to San Antonio for a horse auction. She goes with him, and they have separate rooms, but still they're alone together in a hotel in adjoining rooms, or rooms right next to each other or whatever. And it's like, that's not going to fly, and he
Wow.
gets really angry about something that happened to her in her past, and he pitches a hissy fit, and he says a curse word, and that's not going to fly. And it's like, but you know, just some of the guidelines were just so conservative, and I just couldn't make it fit. And the Christian market, when I started, now, like I said, I haven't followed it to see how much it's changed, if it's changed at all. But I know a lot of it hasn't. But when I started, I wrote regular romance. When I was writing in 5 subject notebooks, I just wrote regular romance. And then when I committed my life to God, when I started typing up my stories, I let their faith shine through. It just came natural to the characters. I didn't try to force anything. I didn't try to preach anything. It just came natural. So trying to change all of that was very difficult for me. And the Christian romance guidelines, they want the chaste side of love, not the emotional side of love, not the physical. And I'm like, well, you can't have one without the other. If there's no sparks, there's no romance. You know, there's no,
Are you talking
there's no,
if I
yeah.
may, are you would they turn like did they not want things as simple as strong physical attraction and like was it that
It
simple
has
that
to
they
be
didn't want?
very understated, but not just in the physical attraction, in any hard emotions. Like in my book, The Visionary, it's a women's fiction, and there's a male female set of twins that are the main characters. Well, they experience some severe child abuse as children, and he tries to commit suicide. And I had sent it out to some beta readers, and they said, "Oh, I would have him maybe punch a wall or something." I'm like, "He's already done all that. It didn't work." He's so angry with God. That did not work. And that's The Visionary. It's actually set here in Lake Charles. But, they don't want that, all of that raw emotion that you kind of just. And when I read Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers, I'm like, oh my gosh, y'all published this. And I read the original version, which was published by Random House, but they have their guidelines, and I respect that. I really respect that. It just doesn't fit me. But like in Tempered Dreams, the second in my series, she's a battered wife when the hero and her meet, and her ex pays her a visit, and it's graphic to a certain point, but yet not as graphic as some, like in a secular market. And the hero's a doctor, and he pays this guy a visit, and he beats the fire out of him. He says, "Next time you want to punch on somebody your own size." And so a lot of people are like, "No, you can't do that." I'm like, "Well, why not? I mean, wouldn't a man defend the honor or defend the woman he loves? What's he gonna do?" This guy who can't be stopped any other way.
Yeah.
He's not gonna leave her alone.
So yeah, and you can't. I just want to say, so everything you're describing, it's funny how much I feel like I can relate with it, even though, like I said, I don't write romance. Because one of the things I came across, my stuff is it walks a line, and I often will say it's too secular for the Christian market, but too Christian for the secular market.
Right? That's what I was
And
told many, many times, that you got too much
yeah,
God in it for the secular market. I'm like, "Okay."
yeah. So it's a really tough thing because that's just me. It
Mhm,
sounds very much with what you're saying. I'm like, well,
mhm.
that's just who I am. That's how I write stories. um, and I can't change it. And I considered changing, kind of like you did talked about, but you definitely lose something of the authenticity of the story you're trying to tell when you're trying to edit yourself to fit whatever the guidelines are, justified or not, of certain editors and certain publisher houses. And like you said, I agree. Like, you have a right to have those guidelines. I have no problem with you having that guidelines. It just puts people like you and me in a little bit of a, okay, well, I guess I'm going to be independently published most of the time, because unless I find a perfect editor who really wants to work with this kind of story, um, it's just hard to do. But I just applaud your sticking to your guns. I think that's great. I am interested too. So tell me a little bit about. You said that you don't force faith; it just kind of comes out naturally in your characters. And I'm really interested to hear if you can elaborate that on that any more about how you see your fiction as maybe shining a light on something true and good, without beating people over the head with the Bible or something, right?
Right. Well, in The Visionary, um, the the young man, I don't wanna give too much away, but they end up doing some counseling with her pastor. Now, the sister has come a long way in healing, but the brother hasn't. And so he agrees. So there's a lot of scripture in that. But he walks in the church and he throws that Bible down at that pastor's feet and he said, "This is all hogwash," or whatever. I don't remember exactly his word, you know, "Be angry and sin not," and blah, 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 blah. So, and of course, the pastor is really good with working with him on that. But a lot of it is just it comes out in conversation. It just comes natural, and I'm real big to say, or first to say that, um, to me, this is not fiction. I'm just telling these people's story. They're telling it to me, and I'm just writing it down. I'm just telling their story. These characters come to me. They just come to me and start talking. And a lot of people think, "Oh, that's crazy." But there's a lot of authors that feel that way. I'm just writing it down and I clean it up. I clean it up because there's sometimes, like in The Visionary, when the heroine is telling her hero what had happened to her as a child. I was in his point of view and he was furious. And he's like, "That was one sick, blah, 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 blah." I said, "You can't say that. You can't say that." But I had to write it to stay true to the scene. So when I was editing, I switched to her point of view and had her shocked at the foul word and the steady stream of language that came out of his mouth because he was so angry. And you know, and a lot of people say, "Well, I know people that's never said a curse word." Well, I applaud them. I really do. But when I lose my temper, I can't promise what's going to come out of my mouth or not going to come out of my mouth. And I know a
Yeah,
lot of people like that and they love God with all their heart. But I want to reach those that normally would not pick up a Christian fiction book and let them still get a message.
yeah.
Let
How
them
how's
still get a
that?
message.
How has that gone? I mean, have you had people? How often do you have someone that maybe doesn't read Christian fiction that has told you, "Hey, I read your book and it it mattered or it moved me or
I've had a lot of people, especially, like with the Tempered Dreams and the Visionary that were counselors that, that normally don't read fiction at all. Read the book and say, or the books and say, this really made an impact on me and on how I treat my patients that have gone through this. Or like Tempered Dreams that, you know, I normally don't read Christian fiction, but uh, it made me think of the forgiveness I need to offer in my own life, things like that. Because for her to be healed, she has to forgive her ex-husband, you know? And so it's things like that that make it worthwhile. And it's just there's many, like I had a reviewer say about Temper Dreams, never dogmatic or insular, but the faith that shines through, true to the characters.
yeah. And I think
I've also,
that's what good fiction should do,
yeah,
in my opinion. I was
right.
listening the other day to a girl, I say a girl, she was in her 20s, but she went to Columbia, one of these Ivy League schools for literature.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not your typical Ivy Leaguer. And she was talking about how a lot of modern fiction is into deconstructing all of like our traditional values. Like that's the movement.
Mm-hmm.
And she was tracking it. Like this person
Mm-hmm.
taught this person taught this person thought this. Because what's not popular nowadays is anything that tries to teach that there's a real right and wrong or like traditional values or matter. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so to me, it's always refreshing to talk to anybody who's like, no, 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 there's true stuff out there, and I'm wanting to shine a light on it with my writing.
Right. Right.
So I specifically wanted to ask you about your most recent book, and I actually tried to buy it. I tried to go into the Charm page. I hope they had a copy to buy it, and they didn't. They didn't have a copy there, and
No,
so
they don't have it yet. I'm gonna be bringing it to them for
yeah.
print copies. The the ebook is gonna be at Amazon for I leave it in Kindle Unlimited for about 90 days, and then I see how it's doing. If it's doing really well, I'll leave it longer.
The premise, okay, let me see if I remember it because it was a couple days ago, but it was basically the balance between giving and receiving and learning to
Yes.
do that well. So, if you could, you want to give us a little primer on it, maybe kind of pitch it to a potential audience and tell us a little bit about what you explore in that one.
Sure. A lot of people give. We give, we give, we give, we give. And many people get burned out because you hear a lot that, I'm tired of being the only one giving, blah, 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 blah. I give all the time and I never get anything in return. But here's the thing, we should give out of love. It should be a loving gesture, a cheerful gesture, not out of obligation. Now, yes, we have obligatory giving, caregivers and things like that. But the whole point of the book is to help open you up to receive. People get closed off. They don't realize that God is always giving back to you, you know? And even the Bible says, give and it shall be given unto you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. And that God loves a cheerful giver. And so my hope for it, my prayer for it is that it's a journaling project and there's lines to write. There's some blank pages if you want to doodle or draw. It's in black and white so you can color the pages or whatever. But my hope is that people will read the book and they'll start realizing, oh, wait a minute. Giving is not just money. Giving is time, it's energy, it's experience and knowledge. There are five touch, and then money. So there's five types of giving, and I explore each of the types of giving. I share some stories about that type of giving, and then I have a journal prompt. There are places for them to write, and then it's a 30-day practice where there is a quote from a famous person on giving, and some questions that you answer for the day. What did I give today? Well, that makes you think about what you gave. And then it makes you open to receive and looking, oh, wait a minute. I did this, but look what happened for me today. You know, 5 cars let me cut in line, or somebody paid my lunch, or it's like, oh, and we are giving, we just not recognizing. the correlation between the two. We're not recognizing how generous we are. We're not recognizing, our worthiness to receive because we give. So my hope is that that will unravel some of that for people.
Yeah, I love the idea, and I think I told you a little bit. So, just Saint John Paul II, Pope John Paul II, he had a couple of books, and a lot of the subject matter of one's called Love and Responsibility, one's called Theology of the Body. But one of the ideas is that we're called to make sincere gifts of ourself, and that means like freely giving of yourself. So you're talking about a cheerful giver. Like, what does that mean? That means putting yourself aside and happily giving of yourself for someone else's sake. But like you
Mhm.
said, on the flip side of that, you also, if people can't receive the free gifts being offered to them, there's something missing. There's something that's
Mhm.
off.
Mhm.
So I love your attempt to reconcile this and get people to focus in on it, because I forget it all the time. Like, I've read books
Mhm.
about a similar, basically the same thing you're talking about, and it's something that is not in our awareness very much. So I just think it's
Right.
really cool. And it's cool that you go from like these pseudo spiritual romances to this like nonfiction devotional book. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I do, my tagline is inspirational with an edge. And so in my bio, it says, that's how that defines my life, my coaching, and my writing style.
I just really like that idea. Well, Pam, what do you have coming up next?
Well, right now I'm not actively working on anything. I started a series called Women of the Ninth Circle, and they're all healers of some sort. And there's going to be a lot of supernatural stuff in it. Intuition, listening to God's voice. I love energy medicine. I have a friend of mine that's an energy medicine practitioner. I believe in the body's ability to heal itself, of course, with the help of God. But God is alive in us. Jesus, the Holy Spirit is in us. So the ability is in us. You have to release it through your thoughts, your words, your actions, whatever. So I started that series, and that's hopefully what I'll be working on. Hopefully get the first of the series out this year or early next year. But I have to just kind of go with the flow. I've got so much going on. Like you said, I have my YouTube channels, and I blog, and have my book blog, and
Yeah.
travel. So I just hopefully that'll be one to come out this year or early next year. And then just, I don't know, after that, if something else stirs my interest and sparks my creativity, I'll write it. So I just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And I can't wait to see what you do next. And like I said, I'll try to pick up a copy of your book. Maybe we could talk again after I read it. We can
Sounds
exchange
great.
notes.
Same. That
All
sounds
right.
great.
Well, Pam, I appreciate you coming on today, and I guess I'll see you maybe at a Bayou Writers meeting.
I hope so. It's very, very likely.